You're listening to Let's Be Honest with your host, Just Johnda. All right, everyone who's listening on the podcast live, I am about to get into part two of the peculiar case against Lizzo. As I mentioned before, I'm also doing this live on the Bigo app. So if you want to come on there and interact with me live, I am right here. So you can also find me on Bigo under Just Johnda. So I'm going to bring the Bigo audience in as well. Welcome, everybody. This is Just Johnda. We are jumping right in tonight into part two of my coverage or my in depth coverage of the complaint against Lizzo in our series that we are calling The Peculiar Case Against Lizzo. For those of you who follow pop culture, if you haven't been living under a rock, then you know that the megastar Lizzo is coming under fire this week, at least from some, due to a civil complaint filed by several of her dancers. And over the past day or so, additional individuals who are not a part of the civil complaint also coming out in support of them, as well as talking about their experience as dancers on tour with Lizzo. For those of you who are in the room, please make sure you are sending those gifts. Give us some beans. Interact as well. Hi, Debbie. Nice to meet you as well. Make sure that if you have any questions, you feel free to put them in the chat and I will incorporate them into my discussion. And this is the same thing for the individuals who are listening live on the podcast. If you're listening back to this and recording, of course, I'm not going to see any chat from you. But for those who are doing it live, I will certainly try to make sure that I answer your questions when I can as we go along. So let's get started because there is a lot to get into, especially given um, the fact that individuals have come out and done interviews today, as well as okay, so individuals come out. Oh, and I'm sorry, I just had a quick brain fart. What's that about? And of course, Lizzo herself has spoken. For those of you who are watching me on Bigo, if you were not here last night, you'll notice that ever so often I look like I'm looking away. And that is because I have all of this information up on my computer screen. And so I am going to be back and forth looking at you on the screen on my phone as well as looking at my computer screen so that, again, I am bringing you all of the best and most correct information in real time. Okay, so one of the first things I want to start with tonight is the fact that Lizzo has made a statement. So, this is a statement from Lizzo. She posted it on her Instagram. Quote, the last few days have been gut-wrenchingly difficult and overwhelmingly disappointing. My work ethic, morals, and respectfulness have been questioned. My character has been criticized. Usually, I choose not to respond to false allegations, but these are as unbelievable as they sound and too outrageous to not be addressed. Well, first things first, that's what you have a lawyer for. Again, as an attorney, I would never let my client do this. I would have her perhaps do a brief statement. And I'm sure that there is, I can't imagine, especially with the types of individuals that she has access to. I am going to hope that this was vetted, but there's part of this that makes her sound and I'm not saying that she has to be contrite, especially if she is saying that she is innocent. But there's a fine line between saying that you are innocent and, given the nature of what she's charged with not sounding a little high-handed as well. So it's a tough line, which is typically why we don't have clients walk those lines. This is why you have individuals like your publicist, like your attorney, who handle these things for you. So let's get back to this. The sensationalized stories are coming from former employees who have already publicly admitted they were told their behavior on tour was inappropriate and unprofessional. I don't like to be looked at as a victim, but also know that I am not the villain that people and the media have portrayed me to be these last few days. I'm very open with my sexuality and expressing myself, but I cannot accept or allow people to use that openness to make me out to be something that I am not. There's nothing I take more seriously than the respect we deserve as women in the world. I know what it feels like to be body shamed on a daily basis and would absolutely never criticize or terminate an employee because of their weight. Okay, everybody who's coming in the room, I love that you're joining. Please keep sending those hearts, send those beans, those gifts, all of those. Fantastic. All right. So, I'm, and finally, I'm hurt, but I will not let the good work I've done in the world be overshadowed by this. I want to thank everyone who has reached out in support to lift me up during this difficult time. Now, in response to Lizzo's statement, we have the attorney for the plaintiffs, and you all probably already know how I feel about him because I mentioned it before. Um, Ron Zambrano, the attorney representing the dancers, said, and this is coming from Variety, said that Lizzo has, quote, failed her own brand and has let down her fans. Her dismissive comments and utter lack of empathy are quite telling about her character and only serve to minimize the trauma she has caused the plaintiffs and other employees who have now come forward sharing their own negative experiences. Was this necessary if you were not out seeking attention for yourself? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. As I said before, this is someone who my impression right out the gate was someone who was attempting to be more important than the clients in the case that he is involved in. That whole statement, nothing too terribly bad about it, but quite frankly, I could see that just that being said in court. I could see that perhaps being said in a press conference. It's nothing that you had to run to the latest outlet of anybody who is willing to give you the time of day and listen to you for you to say. So one another note, speaking of lawyers, TMZ reports that Lizzo has hired Hollywood heavy hitter Marty Singer to represent her. This is an individual who he's the one that even the A-listers, on the Hollywood side of things called. Not that Lizzo hasn't reached A-list status, but I'm talking the folks that we see owning planes and jumping out of planes. Marty Singer is the guy to call. He is reputed to have represented more individuals in Hollywood than any other Hollywood attorney. So if there's anybody that you are going to hire, and Johnny Cochran's not around anymore, it's Mr. Singer. For those who were here yesterday, you know that part of the reason why I was away for so long was a bout of long COVID that impacted my voice. So if you hear me pausing a bit, it's because I'm drinking some tea. And the individuals on Bigo, of course, see me drinking the tea. Okay, so speaking of tea, let's get into it. So where we left off yesterday was the meeting where Ms. Davis, I was attempting not to use their names, but they've started appearing on television and using each other's names interchangeably. So, we try to be um, graceful about this given the nature of the claims. But if they're fine with their names being out there, then I won't keep twisting myself in pretzels to try to call them plaintiff 1, 2, and 3. So anyway, yesterday we left off with the meeting between one of the dancers. In fact, she's the dancer who appeared on CBS this morning, and Lizzo and this other woman about gaining weight. So this is where that whole alleged weight gain situation came into play. And again, for those who were listening yesterday, we are now in April 2023. For those who are listening on the podcast, episode 1 will be up, should be up tomorrow. It's being edited. So if you want to go back and listen to that so that you can put this entire complaint together, then fine. We already did 19 pages, so I can't go backwards. Okay, so they're building the case. We've already seen the building of the case for sexual harassment. The building of the case as it relates to the harassment and as it relates to the religious discrimination, the meeting, which brought in the issues as it relates to the body. And now we are getting more into the issues as it relates to the money. So let's see, initiating PK. Let me give this gift opportunity to some folks. All right. So, on April 26, 2023, Ms. Williams was terminated. So, this is one of the two ladies who were hired based on them winning the Watch Out for the Big Girl show. So, and we were calling her Plaintiff 3. So, this is not the one that had to deal with a lot of the religious discrimination and the one who had the alleged psychological issues. This is the third one that we didn't hear quite as much about. However, she certainly was there when all of the shenanigans were going on in the nude clubs and the situation with them having to rehearse the 12 hours and being allegedly being berated about behaviors that the women claim they didn't even participate in. Okay, so at that point, she claims that she was fired by one of the individuals who work for the management company, and they claim it was budget cuts. Now, of course, we also know that this is a mere few weeks after the ladies had negotiated getting an advance for half of their salary. Visitors who are coming in, again, if you have questions, make sure you put them in the chat. I'd love to interact with you. All right, so she after she walked away, she said, maybe it's for the best. This is what's going to happen. She, of course, was stunned, but she's who was this person? Ms. Gugliotta said that Lizzo wasn't really good at these things, so they had to be done. She claims that they never had any problems with her. And this is what she also claims Gugliotta said as well. You all, if you could just give me a quick pause so that I can make sure that everyone is invited. All right. Give me a sec. It will take 2 seconds to send this. So, all of you who are listening, just give me a minute. All right. There we go. So, just wanted to make sure that you all were aware that you were being invited to the show. All right. So, now we are back. On April 27th, all the dancers were called into a meeting with Lizzo, and they were going to discuss some dance notes. Again, nothing out of the ordinary. This is just the way things work, right? So they're called in, they're asked to get notes and stuff. Is this something that happens all the time? Absolutely, especially in this world. Prior to discussing the performances, apparently the fact that Ms. Williams was fired was discussed as well. And one of the dancers questioned the way it was done. Now, again, this is where the complaint is kind of going down rabbit holes it doesn't necessarily need to go down. While there may be some issues surrounding the firing, is it really necessary for us to get a whole page of, well, people were wondering, why didn't this person do it? Or why didn't that person do it? Nobody really cares. Okay, so um at that now we get into the allegation that there was a person who was discriminated against on the basis of being differently abled, which brings in an Americans with Disabilities Act allegation and alleged violation. Apparently, one of the dancers, Ms. Davis, who we've talked about quite a bit, suffers from an eye condition, which apparently both Lizzo and the company were aware of, or at least she says that they were aware of. So, according to her, she said that she becomes disoriented in stressful situations. And so she makes audio recordings of stressful interactions with people so that she can review them in less stressful environments. Let's call a spade here, Ms. Davis and your attorney, because again, we're being fair here. The allegations, some of them are outrageous and gross, but we also want to be fair here. Oh, like broke a nail. We want to be fair here as well, and take note of the fact that if you're recording conversations you're not supposed to be, and we all know that that's going to be a problem for the people for the people who were recorded. And so ultimately you got to come up with an excuse for it, right? And so the excuse here is simply, well, I recorded you because I have issues, blah blah blah. We're not even going to get into that. Thank you for you all who are joining. Please like those hearts, those gifts, those beans. I love it. Okay, so in May of 2023, because now we're getting closer, this is only August, they were called into an emergency wardrobe fitting. And at that point, they said security took every dancer's phone as they were entering the room. And and Lizzo allegedly told them that she knew that somebody had recorded their last meeting. And she was going around the room and she was going person to person. And basically, the allegation is that she continued to intimidate them in an attempt to find out who recorded the meeting. She admitted, Ms. Davis did admit that she was the person that recorded it. She claimed that she did it because she wanted a copy of the notes that they received about their performances, that she never intended to, that she never intended to hurt Lizzo. And she said that Lizzo and Quigley, who we were calling Miss Charlene, because her first name is Charlene, that they continued constantly going at her and ultimately fired her on the spot. To which I say, if you're going to fire me, fire me. Don't stand here going off on me like you're my mama and about to break me down and make me cry and all that stuff. You're going to fire me? Just fire me. Ultimately, before she left, the woman Rodriguez asked if she could have a word with her. This is the third woman in the lawsuit. She stated that she didn't like the way the situation went down. She felt it was disrespectful. She was disrespected by Lizzo, as well as feeling like everybody was being disrespected. And she actually resigned. And when she resigned, instead of, and again, these are all allegations, that when she resigned, instead of them just saying, all right, you don't want to be here, thank you, next, even though that's not a Lizzo song, but either way, they could have said it. Instead of doing that, she claims that she screamed at them and They were calling her disrespectful and just being really aggressive. She says at one point, Lizzo even approached her, cracking her knuckles, balling her fists, and claiming, "You're lucky, you're so effing lucky." At that point, she said she feared that she was going to be hit if no one else intervened. Of course, nobody else did. Security stood down, dancers stood down. She claims that it was just a situation where she was on her own, and she claims at a certain point Lizzo was over it, walked out, gave her the finger, and said, "Bye, bitch." Well, actually, she gave her both fingers. Ms. Rodriguez then returned, and was concerned about the fact that she may have been in danger. Ultimately, she left, she went home. Now, this is where it gets interesting because there is an unlawful, of all the claims here, there is also a claim, believe it or not, for unlawful detainer. So, as it relates to the unlawful detainer claim, Ms. Davis claimed that she was forced to stay behind in the room where the meeting had taken place. Now, mind you, she was allegedly forced to stay behind in the meeting where it took place. Thank you so much, Ty, for the diamond. I really appreciated it. Really appreciate it. So she claims that at that point, once everything was over, that they referred to her, that there was a security person that they referred to as Robo, and there was also the tour manager. There was all of these individuals in the room, and essentially the whole purpose of that was for her phone to be searched. So while they were doing that, just give me one moment, I'm going to share once again. All right, so that is done. All right, so that they continued to go through her phone. They were searching through her phone. They were saying that she didn't delete the information. All of those things. I mean, it was really nasty. And ultimately, after she was released, she ran to her hotel room, packed her things, and she met up with Rodriguez, who had already left, so that they could head to the airport. And they just basically sat around there for the next 7 hours. They didn't want to. They alleged that they didn't want to stay at the hotel or anywhere where most of us would say, okay, they probably would have been safer. No, they absolutely decided that they wanted to just be away. So let's go through the causes of action. Now, we know that there are several. And so when I go into them, what I'm going to do is to give you the legal stuff that you don't really get anywhere else. And I'm just going to break it down to layman's terms. I won't bother going through every nook and cranny of the facts, because if you watched yesterday or listened yesterday, then you know that as we went through all of this, some of the factual allegations a little bit more meaty than others, then you know that this was all the I hate to say the setup, because I don't mean it in the way that people say, "Oh, they set Lizzo up." No, I mean from a legal standpoint, when you're preparing your brief or you're preparing your complaint, then you give all of those facts, and they're supposed to ultimately tell a story that once you tie them into the specific causes of action of the complaint, it will all make sense. The person who is reading this will go, "Oh, okay. So that's why you told the story about what allegedly happened at the club, because that underscores your complaint for sexual harassment." So there we go. So the first cause of action, the FEHA, hostile work environment based on sexual harassment. And this is an allegation by all three of the claimants. And they are alleging it against all three of the defendants, at least the three named defendants. Of course, we know that there's 10 John or Jane Does as well. So they allege that a hostile work environment was created based on sexual harassment due to the issues that went on, particularly in Amsterdam and Paris. And not just the incidents at the clubs, but also incidents where they were subjected to Miss Charlene and others publicly simulating in front of them fellatio that the Miss Charlene talked about her alleged personal pleasure, shall we say, habits. So those are all of the things that would underscore this, except they're just going to break them down one at a time. So in this instance, the first is the issue as it relates to watch out for the big girls and being asked to be nude and asked to participate in the nude photo shoot, and the fact that they were persuaded to participate. I would say out of all the sexual harassment claims, for me, that is the weakest. Because as we discussed on part one of this series, not only was the person ultimately accommodated. Thank you very much, John Wine, for the gift. I really appreciate it. And for those of you who are here enjoying the contact, please continue on to send those gifts, send those beans, all of those things. I really appreciate them. For those listening on the podcast, remember I'm simultaneously doing a live video as well as doing the podcast. So you're also hearing some of my reaction with the live video audience as well. So just stick with me. We're not always going to do this for the live video audience, just like this is not always going to be the case for the podcast. But because this was such an in-demand topic that people wanted to talk about, it just made sense for me to do both at the same time. All right, okay, we're back. Now, as I was saying, I think that that is one of the weakest of the claims because number one, you were a part of the contest, and that contest involved you signing, I'm sure, a mountain of crap, not only with the production company and the management company, but also with the network about all, or and in this case, Amazon Prime, about all of the things that you may or may not be asked to do, up to and including potentially being nude. The only thing that you would not be pretty much signing your life away for, especially in a reality show contest, typically are things that are illegal. I mean, just point blank, period. Now, I would love to have a copy of it. I would love to see it. So if there is anybody with any connection to this show who would like to shoot me a copy of that contract, I would love to see it and would be happy to break it down. And I'm serious. You can literally send it to me. The email is let's be honest, JJ. That is LETSBEHONEST like Just Johnda at gmail.com. Let's see it. In fact, if you have any other legal questions or anything or things you'd like us to talk about on the show, please feel free to email it there. Okay, back. Because of that, you are going to be asked certain things that you have a right to do or not do. At that point, also important to note, you did not work for Lizzo. You were a part of a competition show that, while you may have felt your ability to win would be impacted by you not doing certain acts, in this case, um, doing a nude photo shoot, but it literally could be anything, right? What if they asked you to drop it low for 10 minutes straight and, twerk in a squatting position, and you're like, you know what, my knees are just not set up like that? Well, oh well. Is that a cause to sue? Or are you going to say that under the terms of under the Americans with Disability Act, they should have accommodated you and come up with some other way for you to twerk in a squatting position? No. You either do it or you don't. And if you lose the competition because of that, so be it. If you win the competition because you did it a different way, so be it. But the bottom line is it was a competition. And while we know that there are coercive aspects to Hollywood, especially as it relates to women, certainly as it relates to a woman of color, which all of these individuals were, that there's other issues surrounding that, of course, given that not only are they dancers, only but so many opportunities with huge stars, right? There isn't just Lizzo's and Beyonce's doing coming a dime a dozen that are doing major tours that are available to you. So you're competing for positions in a world that is limited, and even more limited. Notice the arguments I'm making are probably what her attorney is going to argue, but even more limited by your size, because being a plus size dancer is not the norm. It is normal, and there are many of you, but it is not the norm in terms of the people actively working in the dance industry. So before anybody tries to come at me, listen to the words that are coming out of my mouth before you start claiming, oh my God, she said fat people don't get jobs. And again, I say fat because that's what they're referring to, how they're referring to themselves. Okay, next. So again, I don't think it's a good claim. This also goes back to what I was talking about yesterday about the fact that sometimes when you try to throw everything in but the kitchen sink, especially when you don't have to, you basically undermine the effectiveness of the claims that you have that are worth a damn. Okay, so they go on and talk about these. I think are some great facts that go towards her claim. Even if I didn't like the other one, the allegations as it relates to Lizzo herself allegedly pressuring the plaintiffs and trying to get them to go on outings and attend things where there was sexually explicit information happening. Hello, Mr. Wagner. Thank you for joining us tonight. Okay, so hello, Danny. Thank you for joining us tonight. So those are some great claims. I mean, some great facts that support the claims. Hi, no one, Rosa, I think is Rosa. Thank you, and thank you for the diamond as well. Okay, now they timely filed a complaint. Some of the stuff is boilerplate. We don't have to worry about that. Now, what is important to understand is what the court is looking at. When you have a claim, there are certain things about it that you have to prove specifically. So, one of them is that you have to not only prove that these events allegedly happened, but more importantly, that number one, there are remedies that you have under the Fair Employment Act, which is why that's the FEHA piece. There's remedies that you have under that. So, first of all, you have to make clear that you've exhausted all of those remedies. I'm sure they have. Any lawyer knows how to get the stuff filed and say that they have. But then the next thing that has to be proven is that as a direct and legal result of the defendant's involved conduct, that you, as in the plaintiff, have suffered and continue to suffer some type of damages, whether general, consequential, and special, including but not limited to loss in earnings or other employment benefits. It could be physical injuries, sickness, emotional distress. Remember, we talked yesterday about intentional infliction of emotional distress, and much more. So those things require proof. So that's where those facts come in. And of course, he's already laid out the facts, he as in the attorney. So now he's just saying, did they suffer that harm? Why, yes, my client did suffer that harm. as it relates to how they were treated. They suffered emotional distress. They suffered anxiety, pain, suffering, physical injuries. Now, does all of that have to be spelled out from day one in the complaint? No. That is what depositions are for. That is what your actual court hearings are for, your actual trials. That is what that is for. Right now, you're just giving a snapshot saying, this is our claim, this is why we are making those claims, and this is why our claims are legitimate. Okay? So those are basically the three things that need to be covered. Now, of course, we know that there's all kinds of, we have jurisdiction and all that. So there's like the legalese of it all. But most importantly, this is our claim. This is why are making our claim, and this is why our claim is legitimate. And of course, I guess we need to toss on the number 4. And this is what I want. I want some money. I want this. I want that. So that's the damages piece. Okay. Next, the second cause of action, yet another sexual harassment charge. This is, or sexual harassment claim. Again, this is that they were subjected to sexual harassment as it relates to them being in a highly sexually charged environment. And because of that, very sexually charged environment, there were things that were allowed to happen and lots of things that were done that again caused them to be in a hostile work environment. So this is where they talk about Ms. Quigley or Miss Charlene's. They talk about Miss Charlene in particular. This is where they talk about the fact that Miss Charlene not only zeroed in on Davis, but it was constant and it was pervasive that Miss Charlene was constantly zeroing in on Davis, not just making her uncomfortable about her own sex life, but also making Ms. Davis uncomfortable by constantly making Ms. Davis's sex life an issue. So it's one thing for me to be uncomfortable because you running around talking smack about your own life and who you're touching and why you're touching them and what you feel and what your fantasies are and having dreams about multiple male members in your face and all of this other stuff. I mean, if push comes to shove, la 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 la, that's one thing. But and for those who are listening, that was me sticking my fingers in my ears and going la la la, I don't hear you. But for you to then take it a step further and make an issue out of what I am doing or not doing in my own life, not only in an effort to make me uncomfortable based on the things that you are saying verbally and telling other people and just basically spreading my business all up and through the town, but it's also problematic because you have made these things it's also problematic because with all that you knew about me and me being incredibly uncomfortable, that you then pressure me when we go out to do things that would be way beyond the pale, especially given what you know about me already. And so, and on top of that, and this is key, because if this is one of those things where we go, red flag, if this part is actually true, then again, huge problem. Hi, Trill Life. Thank you so much for joining. I hope you hang out with us for a while. Okay, if this is true, huge issue. And one of these things is that allegedly she did make it known to the BGB team management and security that she was very uncomfortable and was being pressured into touching the nude performer. And remember, BGBT is the management company, but this is also, and again, this is an assumption, but given that it's like Big Girls, Big Times, or something entertainment, I got to scroll up and look at, but it's going to drive me crazy. Let me look at it right now and I'll tell you what that is. Okay. Big Girl, Big Touring Inc. So we know that that is a company that is either owned by Lizzo or formed specifically for her. So the bottom line is management was aware in a variety of ways. And as we recall from several of the stories that we talked about yesterday, there were people from the management team who did accompany them on these outings. It wasn't like it was just Lizzo and a bunch of dancers, no security, no management, or anybody else that we know would absolutely be traveling with the celebrities, which absolutely puts the management company on the hook, whether it is a management company that is personally owned by Lizzo or not. Okay, so next we're going to skip down to the next claim. Third cause of action is, okay, because remember I just scrolled up a little bit to get that big girl, big times. All right. The third cause of action is the FEHA religious harassment. And this is all three of the women against Miss Charlene, or Quigley, as she's referred to in the complaint, and BGBT, who clearly anybody who was an employee of Lizzo worked for, as well as, and of course, them being on the hook because there was no secret whatsoever that this individual walked around proselytizing, constantly chastising them about the things they were doing or not doing, which is really crazy because it's literally the same woman who was chasing them around trying to make sure that they were worshiping God in whatever manner she saw fit. This was literally the same person who was constantly alleged, and again, these are allegations, so all of this is alleged, constantly talking to them about sex and sex acts. So very strange, clearly repressed, and maybe after, or if we don't know much after all of this, maybe the next person who needs to be offered some therapeutic leave is Miss Charlene. So that's fairly obvious why we already talked about what she allegedly did repeatedly with them. So again, um, it's the same way that they have to prove it that these things did happen, and that as a direct and proximate cause of this, as I'm sorry, as a direct and legal result of this conduct, this caused each of these plaintiffs to have some type of suffering that falls under the law, which that suffering could be general, consequential, special, including or not limited to loss of earnings, employment benefits, physical injuries, sickness, as well as the catch-all emotional distress, medical, future medical attorneys fees, etc. We already know when it comes to the religious piece, the catch-all is going to for everything as it relates to their religious piece, and pretty much a lot of this is going to be emotional distress. Now, as it relates specifically to plaintiff Davis, she is probably going to be the main one where there is going to be, I'm sure there'll be some psych evidence or counseling evidence that is submitted on behalf of all the women. I mean, that would just be smart lawyering to make sure that these individuals are um, have sought help and are continuing to seek help, especially if there are legitimate issues. But hell, even if they're not, you're trying to build a case. And so you need somebody to say that somebody who's willing to say that as a result of what happened to them, these individuals did suffer some harm. And that harm, other than the financial, would be psychological. Perhaps physical if they are individuals who have anxiety, panic attacks, those types of things. Absolutely, because those things are maybe things that start out mental, but or from a mental and emotional place. But as we know, they very much have physical consequences, especially something like an anxiety attack. Or in the case of Ms. Davis, she talked about how these things lead to binge eating. She broke, like, literally had physical breakouts, rashes. And quite frankly, this isn't just a them thing. I'm not just an attorney here on my podcast or Bigo. I'm actually still actively practicing. So absolutely, it is not unusual for these things to manifest themselves physically, and you see them in your everyday life. I'm sure many of you have. You just don't think about it. But anytime you see somebody that is, getting all ugh, when something happens. Well, that is a physical reaction. A lot of people have anxiety or panic attacks, ends up in the hospital thinking they're having a heart attack. It's a physical reaction. So it is important to note those things. And again, the same thing when you're getting to making sure that you're making a case for damages, which is essentially that as a direct or proximate result of the defendant's conduct, that there was some kind of reaction. And in this case, as I suspected, the reaction or the damage that is being alleged is severe emotional distress. Yep. Anxiety. Yep. Pain and suffering. Yep. Physical illness, physical sickness, medical expenses, future medical expenses. Yep, 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 and yep. Uh, Totally textbook, but also makes sense in light of what is being alleged. Okay, fourth cause of action. Now, this one is a little bit different, but right on point for what they need to do. Uh, Again, FVHA, failure to prevent and or remedy religious harassment. This is all the plaintiffs against all the defendants. This again falls squarely into the wheelhouse of Miss Charlene and the constant running them down as it relates to the whole religion thing. Welcome Radar, welcome Nine Alok. So these are the types of things that well, this is the situation that Miss Charlene started, but again, it is against all the defendants because as it relates to Lizzo, you're her boss, so you're responsible. As it relates to the production company, you hired her, so you're responsible. Little pause here, taking a sip of my tea. Pause for the cause. Okay. So, and it goes on into the things that we already talked about, the alleged strong arming these individuals at various times. So, of course, it mentions specific incidents, which is really important, very smart. You want to always mention as many specific incidents as you can. So, great job there. Come on, folks, visitors. I'm giving you some gold here with this good information. Make sure you're sharing this live for my podcast listeners. Share the podcast for the individuals who are on Bigo. Please make sure that you share that. Please join as fans. Send over those beans. I am attempting as much as I can without knocking myself off the page to follow you all as I see you pop up. So Trill Life, I just followed you. And so we're just gonna do that. I'm gonna get to you, Radar and Nana Lock as well in a few moments. Just want to make sure that I don't knock my screen down while doing it. Okay, so we know where this part where that came from. So now let's get to the next one. The fifth cause of action, racial harassment. This is specifically plaintiffs William and Davis against Big Girl Entertainment. We know that mostly this related to the thing that we talked about yesterday, and this one is one of those. is one of those causes of action that come up in any case. It could be criminal, it could be civil, where you really have to take the time as the attorney to make sure that the trier of fact, which is your judge or your jury, to make sure that they understand that what has led the clients to believing that there's racial animus it is a direct result or approximate result of what is it's of stereotypes, of generally common held beliefs. This is not going to be one where they're going to be able to prove it by just saying, okay, well, you see that they said the girls were lazy, or they said that the girls were unprofessional, or, that they had bad attitudes. It's not going to be enough to say that. You are this is going to call upon and probably even require an expert in these matters. It is going to require the individual trying the case to make the connection for the person who's hearing the case, the judge and the jury, to make a connection to something that, quite frankly, they either don't believe, have never believed, or just simply don't get, which is what is informing their lack of belief or not getting it. Especially when those individuals are not a part of your community. There's no guarantee that they are going to have a judge that is a Black woman. In fact, there's probably more of a guarantee that they won't. The same thing with a potential jury. There's no guarantee that they will have a jury that is made up fully of women that look like them. The only thing that they probably can guarantee is that it won't. Why is that important when we talk about making that connection? Because the reality of it is that we very much, even in 2023 in the United States of America, live in a world where people still actively prefer to pretend that certain things don't exist just because they don't happen to them. And this is definitely one of those things. We have seen it. Hell, we've even seen it as recently as the past couple of years, even on reality TV, among women, where ultimately you are going to have to try to get people outside of the community who have never experienced these things and probably thinks that the mere notion is ridiculous, that you have a legitimate reason and a potential legitimate basis to believe that you were being um, treated a certain way as it relates to your race because of the use of certain descriptive words. And that's why I say it may even require bringing in an expert, because you are going to have to make it. Would be one thing if they had something else to underscore this. And I'm talking about this particular part because there's a little bit of something as we move further down the page, but with this particular part, there you don't have someone saying, calling someone the N word or any other derogatory term, because I believe the one woman was Hispanic. You don't have anyone just flat out calling it what it is. What you have essentially is really microaggressions. What you have is individuals using words that they know impact certain segments of the community in differing ways, and it is negative. That it does put out it puts a perception into the atmosphere that even individuals outside of the person that you are talking to will then fall into going along with that perception. And we know that using words like lazy, unprofessional, aggressive, even if they were black men instead of black women, thug, hood, ghetto. That those are things, when those types of terms are used, or slang, or even if you're talking about clothes and go, I wonder if they're going to come in here with saggy pants. Who are you talking about? So those of us who are subjected to that, we totally get it right off the break. You don't have to beat us over the head with it. If I am speaking passionately, even the way I am right now, if I'm speaking passionately about this, and there is someone who just, and maybe a white woman who's sitting next to me, and suddenly she's clutching the pearls going, oh my God, why are you being so aggressive? I already know what that is. Now, getting someone who doesn't want to believe it, that's a totally different thing. But I know what it is, because I also know that if there was someone who looked just like her who was behaving in the same exact manner that I am, that she probably wouldn't clutch her girl pearls and go, why are you being so aggressive? It might just be, well, she's a lot, but I guess she's passionate about what it is that she's talking about. Okay, I know we went down the rabbit hole a bit, but I think the reason why I even went through this exercise with you all is because the level of complexity involved in even trying to get someone to understand that underscores the level of complexity involved in winning. Not that you're going to win the whole, win or lose the whole case based on one cause of action, but for that particular item in the complaint, the more complicated it is, and this is in any complaint really, the more complicated it is to explain, the more complicated the more complicated it becomes for the trier of fact to absorb it, flip it, agree with what you're saying, and give you what you want. The next piece, they talked about the fact that there were rules that seemed to apply even among the dancers, or were applied differently, even among the dancers themselves, even though the majority of them were black. So they, kind of felt a certain kind of way in terms of the hierarchy and the way that they were treated generally. But even within the dancers, it was even further a problem in terms of how the black dancers were treated. Hello, so thank you for the individuals coming in. I am trying to follow you as you go along. I see M for L. I just followed you. Mr. Jack, same thing. And we are going to go to no one, the same. Okay, so, and I thank you for the rewards as well. And again, let's hit it with those beans. Okay, now let's go to the next cause of action. Believe it or not, we're almost done. So, the sixth cause of action, this one is disability discrimination. And this is Mrs. Davis, or Ms. Davis, I'm sorry, against Lizzo and BGBT, which again, we know is the entertainment company whose name I can't seem to keep straight for the life of me. All right, so so that is based on the meeting where she was, well, one of the times actually, because there's several times where we know that Ms. Davis's health came up, especially, and this is where yesterday, when there were several times when I kept saying red flag, red flag, red flag, this is especially poignant here because there were times where, like we said, and the attorney correctly asserts that they knew or should have known about her struggles with anxiety, depression, and binge eating. Number one, she self reported, which led to them doing the psych exam, whether it was an additional one or one similar to what I assume all of them supposedly got. So they knew from self-reporting, they knew from the actual completion of the exam, where she self-reported during the exam. And of course there were that informed a lot of her decision making. And so now we see where this whole idea of trying to make good drama filled reality television by making sure that you have your resident person who is a little bit more susceptible to, shall we say, breakdowns or fallouts than others, if you know what I mean. Just and again, it's the casting soup, right? Because you need that person, you need the so-called mean girl, you need and I'm saying if you have in a cast of all women, you need your mean girl usually ends up being your villain. You need all of these things in order to come up with the casting soup to be able to create your storylines, because you've got hours and hours and hours and hours of filming, but you also need to be able to create a storyline. And the best way to be able to create a storyline is to have a storyline that is going to practically make itself because of who you cast. She was cast to be the fragile one. That's the word I was looking for. She was cast to be the fragile one. She was cast to be the one that at some point you might just luck up into a breakdown. Well, from a casting standpoint, one would argue that that's casting gold. From a liability standpoint, this is where you potentially end up, because you might not always catch that person who falls out before they actually reach the floor. Welcome, Shizzy 2020 or Shizzy 203. Hope you enjoy the conversation. And again, those who are in the chat, make sure that if you have any questions, that you ask them. I'll be happy to help you as your legal guide through this case. Welcome, Osman Tezkan. Okay, so next we and so when they talk about that, we know now this is one, believe it or not, they have good facts for, because you have on the front end of it the fact that she was pretty much set up to fail. You cast her into a high stress situation. Welcome to the room, Tim. You cast her into a high stress situation. Just the fact of the type of contest it was, etc., potentially going on tour, and with personalities, both the made up ones for the purposes of the reality show and the real ones that you have just apparently roaming around. Alleged, if allegedly Miss Charlene, allegedly even Lizzo herself, you've got some real issues that you're creating a soup that might just bubble over and explode and melt your face off. Okay, so this is an interesting one, to say the least, because of the fact that they knew what they could possibly expect, and she was continuously, again, if these allegations are true, she was continuously placed in situations where it was only going to make those problems worse. And there were problems that they were absolutely aware of. The 12 hours worth of rehearsing, the issues with it, this even comes back with the sex stuff, the weight comments, being allegedly not allowed to come and go in a reasonable manner. And of course, more importantly, because of that fragile state, her being likely to um, be someone who would make decisions out of fear as opposed to out of what many, and this is not coming from me, I'm talking about what I'm going to go just say it based on a lot of what I've been reading and seeing with people commenting on this. So I'm just going to use the terms that I've seen. The bottom line is you have someone who, given their emotional state and lack of wellness and well-being in certain aspects of their lives, that you've got someone who is more likely than less to make decisions that defy what some people would consider to be common sense, largely out of fear. Like, for instance, the bathroom incident. There are many who would say, you know what, I don't care how many times they're making you about this rehearsal and how many times they're making you do the dance over and over again. If you're doing the same dance over and over again, then you're not missing like instruction of some new steps if you just go to use the bathroom. But someone who is dealing with anxiety and stress and caught all up in their head with that stuff, that person might act outside of what others may feel is, reasonable, or from a place of quote common sense unquote, and say, you know what, I better stay because I'm going to get in trouble, or I'm going to, this or that and the third. And let's face it, we have seen many people behave that way. We have behaved that way at some point in our lives. When we are younger, when we are children, but even going into your teens and your early 20s. And these women were early 20s. She and one of the others, this was also their first job in an industry that largely leaves them behind because of, well, ironically, given the word that I just used, them being large. So this is an issue. So at this point, okay, give me one moment. Um, I just need to reset something. So this, we'll just call that a little commercial break. Okay, but I'm back now. Let's go to the next claim because we are almost at the end. So we're definitely going to end earlier than we did last night, which is great because I've got other things to do. Okay, the seventh cause of action: intentional interference with prospective employment advantage. So with this, we know that it is largely, and he didn't even waste a lot of time on it because we do know what that was about. That I'm sorry, that was largely based on this insistent implication to the women. Had to drink a little tea on that one. To the women, that if that one, they shouldn't be working other jobs in between this one. Putting them on what was called soft holds, as in, you're still with us, you still work with us, all of that. However, um, it may take a month. Oh, I'm sorry, tour's not happening right now. COVID, Pandorama, all of that. So it may happen next month. Well, I mean, we got to go to Europe and we got to plan, so it may happen a couple of months, but it would just be a good look if you do not take a job and we see you out there on stage twerking for somebody else. Because now, Lizzo didn't say that she's not going to bring you on tour with us if you do, but that's just not the kind of thing we like. We want our people to, because you know how that's put, right? Nobody's going to come out and say it, but I'm sure things were said like, Well, when people see you, and especially because you stand out, you're a larger dancer, you won on Lizzo's show. So when people see you, they're going to associate you with her, but then you're all out there doing stuff with somebody else. And how is that going to look for then you to be back with us? So there's, we know the games that people play to get what they get, to get what they want without flat out putting you under some type of exclusivity contract, because if they do that, they need to pay you. And we already know that there was some shenanigans as it relates to the payment. So they basically felt like those things, that was done um with a conscious disregard for their rights to be free to, number one, just work and make money, but also, and most importantly, they claim, and this is actually a very interesting interpretation of this, their right to be free from torturous behavior, such as to constitute oppression, fraud, and malice. That is a hell of a hill to climb and try to die on. So it'll be really interesting to see um, how how this kind of shakes itself out. That is an interesting one. Not sure how far we'll get, but it's an interesting one generally. Next, assault on against. Now this is plaintiff Rodriguez against the defendant Lizzo. So she claims that she was assaulted, that in the meeting where she was fired, that she was being yelled at aggressively, that there was profanity, the cracking of knuckles, advancing on her, saying she was so lucky. And so essentially, that she feared that she was going to be hurt. And and of course, Lizzo, at the time that she was doing this, she was acting in her capacity as the talent, her boss, but also in her capacity as of her employer and owner of BGBT. Okay, so she is the owner of that. So now you see where how the management company gets pulled into this quite a bit. And so typically, when it is something, an allegation specifically against Lizzo, the management company is always going to be wrapped up in that, because they're one and the same, especially since she's the owner. So she claims that what Lizzo did intended to cause or to place her in apprehension of, or let's just call it what it is, to make her scared of harmful and offensive bodily conduct. So, bottom line is, you don't have to actually connect. If the person was placed in such sufficient fear of harm, then that could cause damages, certainly on the civil side of things. When, once again, what are we talking about? Things like emotional distress and mental anguish. And of course, what is she alleging? Emotional distress. So, and I don't say that to be snarky, or say it that way in any way to imply that she doesn't have a right to feel this way. I'm just, again, making the connection for you. Finally, the ninth cause of action, false imprisonment, that is regarding Davis and against defendant BGBT, the management company. That's an easy one. We saw coming. I won't even drag that one out, that because that was one of the things we actually talked about today, with that whole situation where she was kept in the room. Welcome Salty, GT Rock, and Morrison. Those were things we already knew, that's where, for those of you who remembered, there was a false imprisonment claim. We already knew that that's where was going to come from. She was fired. yet not allowed to leave while, again, allegedly, while they went through her phone. That's pretty much a, what did they do to meet to have allegedly done this? This is what they did. And so, of course, the law allows for, when it comes to false imprisonment, either you actually physically being restrained or being put into such a sufficient to into a state of fear sufficient that you would feel like you were being restrained, right? It's no different than simply saying to your child, you go and touch that door and see what happens. Don't you try to leave out that door. You get away from that door. Okay. So with her, it wasn't as overt as that. No, although they, wouldn't give her her phone back and they were going through her stuff. So, I mean, I guess it was kind of that overt. But again, there's a lot of things under the law, because I know that this is going to be a thing for people, where it has absolutely nothing to do with whether or not someone actually grabbed her, held on to her, and said, you can't leave. It is the fact that there are things being done that puts you in a state where it is reasonable that you believed that you couldn't. And in this particular case, given, and again, this is taking these things as true, in this particular situation, given that she had already been allegedly berated and fired, and on top of that, witnessed a whole situation with her colleague Rodriguez, because all of this happened in the same meeting. And then on top of that, them actually physically having her phone, because remember, everybody's phones were taken when they came in anyway, and now you are someone who is fired and clearly on, not on the anybody's good side, at least your bosses, and you fired me, but you're not giving me my phone, and you're still yelling and cussing and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, I'm assuming I can't go any freaking where, especially if I want my damn phone so that I could get on a plane and go home since I'm fired. But also not in small part to due to the fact that, again, if these things actually occurred, you all acting like freaking crazy people. So, and remember, welcome, Chris. Remember, this is also the person who is already dealing with issues related to their ability to function. So this is problematic. Okay, give me 1 second. Just someone had just hit me up about sharing this with them on IG. So I am in the process of doing that. So just give me a moment. Okay. All right. Okay. Sent that. All right. Okay. So now I'm back. Yes, that was weird. My face was like frozen on the screen. Ew, that was gross. Okay. So what are they asking for? So this is the part where they say the prayer. What are they asking for? Damages, damages, and more damages. Damages according to proof of unpaid wages, loss of earnings, deferred compensation, other employment benefits. That may not be a whole lot. I mean, they're background dancers, and that's not to disparage the dance world of background dancers at all. If in this house we are all about dance, and like I said to you y'all yesterday, I'm a dance momager, so that is we have the utmost respect for dance, but they don't make very much. And these were also contest winners who then went into an employment arrangement that, based on the fact that, we tour sometimes, but sometimes we don't tour. The fact that clearly there was no specific exclusivity, that's why it was something that was more implied to them. So that tells me that there was no contractual agreement that says we have to pay you this amount over a period of time. They may have had to give some kind of benefits, and sometimes, as some employers just refuse to understand, it is to your benefit in some ways. It may cost you a lot of money, but if you have workers who really want to work, is to your benefit to promote or assist in keeping them healthy, especially in a situation like this, because they are involved in a physical activity all day, every day, as for their job. And her show depends on them being able to do that. Again, rabbit hole, I'm coming out. Uh, but bottom line is, that's not gonna, I guess, long story short, that's not gonna be where the money is. Welcome, Renz. Thank you for coming in. For those of you that are here, especially if you've been here the whole show or yesterday, make sure you hit us up with those beans. It is much appreciated, especially being that I've only been on this platform for a couple of days, but I think I've been killing it. Okay, so what's next? For general damages, including but not limited to emotional distress, according to proof. Now we're getting into the money. Welcome, James. Because now we're talking about all of this stuff that has been put on me, has made it hard for me to live, to function. In the case of the individuals who already were dealing with some psychological issues, you have made them worse. And in the case of individuals who may not have had those issues, well, now I have them. And this is a pervasive and ongoing condition that I should be compensated for. So that's your general damages for anything, but of course they said including but not limited to emotional distress. Special damages according to proof, reasonable medical expenses. Obviously, at least for the purposes of this, because it doesn't sound like there was an actual huge physical incident, someone actually hitting someone, or really any injury. There just wasn't any described. This again is going to tie into the emotional distress, because most of those damages are going to relate to the needing psychological help, essentially. Now here's the big money. And for those of you who followed some of the recent cases, especially ones involving people on the internet, one that is still messy and kind of ongoing, specifically the Tasha K Cardi B situation, which again, for the podcast listeners and even people on Bigo, if you want to go back to that, I did extensive coverage on that on the podcast. So those episodes are up on the podcast on all platforms. The name of the show is Let's Be Honest with Just Johnda. I will also put it in the notes for this episode if anybody wants to look that up. At any rate, that's where the big money comes in, because a lot of this other stuff, even for the damages as it relates to emotional distress, you have to actually prove the emotional distress, and then you have to quantify the emotional distress. And one of the ways that you quantify the emotional distress is really going to be it's going to be about the doctor, what the doctor you have, the doctor you're going to get, all of the, that's where the proof for or lack thereof comes into play on that. So punitive in a situation like this is huge. And that's why I bring up the Cardi B Tasha K case, because ultimately, ultimately, Cardi B ended up getting a judgment against her for almost $4 million. Less than a million of that, far less than a million of that, was actual tangible damages related to her medical expenses, and the actual we can put our finger on it and say this is how much it costs for her to have a therapist and have that therapist fly to where she needed her to be, because there were times when she was on tour, any medication, etc. Those things are fairly quantifiable, in any and even future medical needs to a certain degree, based on what you've already been doing and what your alleged problem is now because of the other person's behavior. You can kind of quantify that as well. But backing up from that, where does the rest of the money come from? The punishment. The punishment. And that is also in the Cardi B Tasha K case where the big money came from there. That is where the court says, okay, we've talked about the fact that you allegedly did these things. And because you allegedly did these things, this is what her injury was. So now we're talking about the fact that the court will say, you know what? I believe that you allegedly did these things. Well, I don't know if I don't necessarily believe you did all of them. So let's say I believe you did that. So there's nine causes of action here. So let's say they say, I believe you did 5 or 6 of them. Well, let's say they say 5. I'll be generous. To either side, really. You say you did 5 of them, 4 of them you didn't, so we toss those out. But based on the 5 that we said you did, because none of these are pretty. So let's be clear. Any number of the 5, she could get hosed. Whether it's one of the 5. This is some ugly ish that's being alleged here. So this is where the judge says, okay, we're going to go with 5. I believe out of your 9 causes of action, I believe I'm finding you finding Lizzo BGBT, and in certain cases that involve her, Miss Charlene, I'm finding in favor of the plaintiff, the dancers, plaintiffs 1, 2, and 3, in their respective causes of action on, let's say, 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. I'm just choosing at random. The rest of them, toss them away. Okay. I'm going to give X number of dollars that corresponds specifically with your medical needs, current and ongoing. Okay. Out of the way. Now we need to deal with how I'm going to punish you, because I have decided that not only did you do some dirty shiznit, but you did 5 different acts of dirty crap according to how I'm finding you under the law and under these facts. And now I have to punish you. Well, I'm not going to lock you up because this isn't a jail thing. But what I am going to do is show you better than I can tell you that this is not behavior that we consider to be tolerable. Now, I don't give a damn who you are. So here's $1 million for you, $1 million for you, $1 million for you. So that is where you get, like in the case of Cardi B and Tasha K, that's where you get a situation going from, oh, here's barely $1 million in medical and mental or what have you. But when all is said and done, here's another 2.5 million plus lawyers' fees. That's your punishment for going around saying some crazy stuff about somebody you don't know just because they don't want to talk to you. That's where that comes. That's where that comes from, and that's where that came from in that particular case. Thank you for all these people who are joining. I see you there. Big Mike, WBL, Top Print, Mel, Mark, Jason. Thank you all for joining. Please make sure that you are hitting us up, because this is a lot of work, you all. I had to actually read this stuff and dissect it for you. And yes, while I do this for a living, I could be doing something else that is actually making me money. So let's hit it back with these rewards and beans. I really, really appreciate it. Okay, so that is where we are with the actual cause of action. So, what do I think? All right, so two of these individuals were actually on CBS this morning, and I watched the interview. And um, I will say this: do I think that they appear to be credible? Yes. In And if that is the overall impression that the court gets of these individuals, that they seem to be credible, not crazies, not just somebody who woke up and said, let's take Lizzo down today, then I think the question is less about whether or not these women appear to be telling the truth, or some version thereof that is sort of, for one of a better way of putting it, their proof. I mean, their truth. Um, because all of these things that they're saying, none of them sound implausible. And as much as Lizzo may gripe about the fact that, or about feeling like the fact that she is so free with her sexuality and with her body and all of those things now being used against her in this case, well, she can gripe about those things all she wants. And when you put it that way, does it sound fair if that is what leads people to believe that about you, or that you could do these things? Um, I suppose in a perfect world, if we were living in a perfect world, we could say that's not fair and people shouldn't do it. But that's not the world we live in. And also, it's a simple 1 plus 1 is 2. And, because it is. And, you might be 1 plus 1's 2 with some extra special sauce on it. Because you are, whether it's a woman or a man, you can't divorce what someone's behavior has been even in the public eye. It would be one thing if these were things that people assumed about them or about her. But this is continuous antics in the public arena pretty much since she became popular. And we're talking, when did she start to blow up? Was it pre-pandemic? Is it, it's just, time is just so crazy, with us losing literally like a whole pocket of time when we were all inside, so to speak. Actually, it was because, just looking at the timeline of this case alone, the watch out for the big girls aspect of this began in 2021. And so clearly she was already very, very popular in all over the world, and popular enough that Amazon Prime gave her a show. So, yeah, I guess that's about right. She has been on the scene, and maybe not as like super mega star as she is now, but certainly well established on the scene. I would say at least the last 5 years or so. What, 2018, 2018, 2019 till now. So that's about right. About I guess we're going into about 5 years. So for 5 years, we have seen you do everything from be literally whole ass out at basketball games. It's not even worth trying to figure out what you're going to get in on any given day, on her Instagram. Welcome, Big D and Kyle. what you're going to get on her Instagram, and just all, and even her stage show in some areas. I am not saying that and I hope that those who are following this with a sense of logic as opposed to, listening to respond, that you understand that this is not about judgment in terms of the things that I'm saying. I'm not saying them to judge her. I'm saying it because that's what we see. And that is what you put out there. So again, it is not beyond the realm of anybody's understanding, including yours, even if it sounds upsetting to you, Miss Melissa Jefferson, that people may be well inclined and understandably inclined to believe that a good portion of these things did indeed take place because of the image you put out there. You can call it positive, you can call it body positivity, you can call it all of those things. And all of that may be true. But what is also true is that it is also naked. It is also to some offensive. It is also to some obscene. It is just like it is also to some a celebration of your beautiful body and strong womanhood and all of those things. All of those things, when it comes to how people perceive you based on the images that you put out, it falls into that realm of more than one thing can be true at the same time, at least in terms of how people feel and what they're inclined to believe. They may not be true about you as a person, but they certainly uh, can and will be true about the way people feel when they look at you as a person and when they hear about certain things. And I will use a very simple example right from your case. Let's remove the entire piece about the alleged sexual harassment, about the young lady with anxiety and whatever. Let's say that none of that was even in play. Would it be beyond the realm of belief for us if we had just heard generally, hey, JoJo, AAC, Sid, K9 Mitchell, thank you for coming. Thank you for joining in. Please hit those hearts, those gifts, those beans. Let's help a sister out. Okay, so if I had simply said to you, or maybe not me, but let's say a news story came out. She's in Amsterdam, so what's that? The Daily Mail, covers a lot of the European stuff as well as over here. Let's say the Daily Mail did a story and it wasn't even anything negative, just a basic story, and said, oh, Lizzo was in town on her blah 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 tour, and she was seen last night with several of her dancers heading into the such and such, if something begins with a B, I can't remember, into the blah 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 bar, and that place is known for nude dancing and really overt sex acts and what have you. And insiders tell us that Lizzo and her group fully enjoyed and took advantage of the local hospitality inside the restaurant and had lap dances and drinks and body positivity and free love for all. There was nothing negative, unless you just want to be negative, that I said. I'm just saying, because that's basically what happened, right? If you remove the aspect of certain dancers feeling uncomfortable, would anybody not believe exactly what that story reported if there was nothing negative associated with it, based on who Lizzo herself portrays herself to be, both publicly and semi privately, because, you may be at home, but if it's on social media, how private is it? Would any of us not believe it? And other than anybody who just wanted to judge her just for the sake of judging her, would there be any reason to think, oh my gosh, that's terrible, I can't believe she did that? We go, okay, I mean, she's grown, whoever she's with is grown, and I mean, it's Lizzo, and she's, love thyself, twerk on Instagram with your booty out and your butt cheeks, and public displays of affection with the new boyfriend and all of that. Well, of course she went there, and I'm sure that she told and again, keeping it positive, I'm sure she was like, hey, you got any big guys, big girls, let's party, whatever. Nobody would blink. So I say to Lizzo that the only difference here is that based on the allegations, there were some people with you who went only because they worked for you and felt uncomfortable when the quote fun unquote began. So are people believing things, negative things about you just because they want to? Or are they believing negative things about you because two things can be true at the same time? A, that you do appear to kind of promote yourself as the type of person who, and again, I don't say that it, or as a person who would go to a place where, it's kind of wild and free, and be more than happy to buy everybody in the room lap dances and, drinks on me type chick. But it could also be true that while all of those things were going on, you, even if totally, totally unintended, also made some individuals feel very uncomfortable, harassed, and just emotionally just overwrought because of what they were going through. Both of those things can be true and it not have anything to do with anybody, just hating on you just because. Now, am I even remotely stupid enough? Well, first of all, I'm not, pretty much about anything, but in finishing this sentence, am I remotely stupid enough to believe that there are individuals who are jumping on the hateration train and got the pitchforks out and ready to, I don't, you know what, I'm not even going to use the word because I hate it, but ready to essentially take your star down as many notches as they could take it in an attempt to, you know, try to ruin your career, or, well, not necessarily personally ruin your career, but be, promoting the idea that your career should be over because of this. Are there people who are behaving that way merely because it's you? No other reason. Not because they've taken the time to read the complaint, not because they have um really put any true thought or any level of discernment as we have into what we believe about these claims, or if there may even be anything to believe about these claims. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate you all. Fred and Gamonias, Kair, and Chapel, thank you so much for coming in. I hope that you are joining. Please start following so that you will know when I am doing these lives. We have a lot more coming up over the next several days. We still have to cover the Cardi B stuff, and um, Carly Russell. There's a lot. So definitely you want to be a part of that and make sure. So certainly make sure that you follow, join as a fan. I would love that as well. And make sure you are sending those beans. So that was a little station break for those who are listening on the podcast. So again, back to what I was saying about Lizzo, especially when she talks about her hurt. Understandable, because there are absolutely some people who are hating just to be hating. They don't give a damn about the women involved in this, nor do they really care whether or not the allegations are true. They don't like you. They don't like the way you look. They don't like that you're popular because they don't think that you're all that interesting or that you have a great voice or any number of things that people who are all about the Lizzo hateration of the week are going to do. We know that. And you are absolutely right about that. But that does not in any way negate the fact that there are legitimate reasons based on your behavior. And I'm not policing your behavior. I'm just saying it is what it is. For people to draw the conclusion that some of these things, particularly the sexual ones at the club, that some of these things occurred, whether deliberately, and whether you deliberately intended to make these women feel a certain kind of way, is irrelevant, because it doesn't matter whether or not you intended to do it. The fact is that if they were put into a certain environment, not only whether by their promoter, their employer, or promoted by their employer, encouraged maybe a little too strongly by their employer, because you are their employer, it kind of sucks for you. So I think, I'm glad that she's got a great attorney, because for those who have listened both yesterday and to today's show, then and watched or listened to today's show along on the podcast, then I hope that you kind of picked up as we were going through, where I explained to you the areas that I thought were probably a bit problematic. But when it comes to the whole thing, I don't think this whole thing is going away. There's a little bit too much there. And quite frankly, these ladies, just like you, have a lot of support, and good on you for having it. God bless you. Everybody should. But so do these ladies, and their support, a lot of it is coming from other individuals who claim that when working for you, they were basically put in the same situation. So, do with that what you will. But there are some concerns. Is this entire case a slam dunk? Absolutely not. But there are definitely some things that Miss Melissa Jefferson, also known as Lizzo, needs to be concerned about. As you can hear, especially those on the podcast, I am starting to lose my voice. Remember what I told you about my struggles over the past year with the voice thing. It's getting better though. So I hope that it's not so scratchy that you aren't like, I don't want to hear about this. For those on Beagle, just give me a few moments while I end the podcast. All right. So everyone, thank you so much for listening tonight on Let's Be Honest with your host, Just Johnda. That's me. I hope you will continue to do so. Please like and share this podcast. Make sure that you give us great reviews wherever you are listening. And make sure that you go over to places like Apple, Spotify, give us 5 stars, leave a review so that we could blow this up just as big as some of these other podcasts that, let's face it, we know are not as good as us. Okay, so once again, thank you. If you want to join us for the Daily Fun, you will see a link in the info box regarding our Facebook community at the Fashion and Drama Diaries. Come on over and join us. We always have lots of fun, and I try to bring additional gossip and stuff every day that we can go back and forth about, especially since, can't constantly be on podcasts all day, every 10 minutes. So make sure that you are doing that. And we are everywhere that you listen to your podcast, including Google, Spotify, uh, what else? I'm sorry, Acast, iTunes, TuneIn. We are in all of those places. iHeartRadio. So please, please, please listen to us. Enjoy the show because I certainly enjoy doing it. And we have a lot of great stuff coming up that I can't wait to share. So as always, if you're thinking about it and want to talk about it, chances are I'm thinking about it and I want to talk about it too. So let's be honest together. Good night.